All right. Well, we're rolling into another episode of the podcast, and the guest today is Brady and Sydney Bond, and so why don't you? Well, you guys are both. I'm here at Kingswood. I got a little put a little plug in for Kingswood, right? And so you guys are both graduates of Kingswood. How long ago did you guys graduate? Because it all blurs together in my mind.
Yeah, we graduated in 2018, so we're coming
Okay.
up on 3 years since we were last on campus as students.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it goes by fast.
and why don't you just for those people who may not know you, why don't you just kind of tell us where you're at now and what you guys are doing for ministry?
So Sydney and I were in Elmira, New York. We are connected to Victory Highway Wesleyan Church, but we're one of the campuses. So long story short, over the period of the last year and a half, really, we've been going through a merger with a pre-existing Wesleyan church. And then not this past January, but the January before is when we officially became a campus. So a Victory campus. We merged with Elmira Wesleyan Church, and it was a really successful merger, and then we launched right into COVID. So
right. So what timing, right?
Yeah.
Everything was looking rosy, and then boom, COVID. So
we're like the co-campus pastors, and between the two of us and an office admin, we kind of cover all parts of ministry down here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why don't we back up a little bit? If you guys have like everybody's call to ministry is a little different, I think. And so, some people have real specific things, and then other people are like, I don't know, man, I just drifted into it. But like, why don't you both tell us a little bit about how you ended up in ministry? How did you get called to ministry?
You want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I thought that I was going to be going into the field of science, and I really wanted to study to become a physical therapist. And so I was looking at, a lot of years of school ahead of me. And I was actually at a local community college right after high school, while I was still trying to figure out exactly what I want to do, exactly where I would go to study. And really it was during that time, I stayed plugged in at our home church is Victory Highway, the church that we're campus pastors at now. And so I stayed plugged in as a volunteer, which was really huge during that time in my life. And really just through prayer, there was one night that God just gave me the wisdom to see pretty much myself when I would retire, if I choose to go into physical therapy, and that I could have a successful career. I check off all the things that your career is supposed to do. But that I would have this feeling of that I've missed out, that I've missed being able to devote more of my life to God. And so I realized, I'm like, okay, well, if a vocation, if I pursue physical therapy and that vocation leaves me feeling like that at the end of my career, that doesn't seem like a very well used time of my life. I don't want to wait till I'm retired to be able to really jump into missions or to jump into really living my life for God. And so then that started opening up the door to me thinking, okay, well, maybe I'm supposed to be doing something else vocationally. Maybe I'm not supposed to just be pursuing something that I know can guarantee me a good career, a good retirement, good vacations, all this stuff that oftentimes the world tells you, like, this is what you need to be pursuing. And so for me, it was just that wisdom of realizing that I'm going to be very disappointed and wish that I could have lived more of my life for God if I chose to not go into ministry. So really that started my gears going and started discussions happening to see, okay, what does it look like then to go into ministry, and what does education look like and all that. And so you really, like, those 2 years that I was at community college were really huge in being able to figure out a lot of those answers to questions that I had. Yeah.
That was a pretty mature move to think about the end of at that age, to think about the end of your life and work backwards. I don't think too many people do that.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I really do think it was just wisdom that God gave me. Like, this is how you're going to feel. So just be aware.
And if you know Sydney, she's wise beyond her years. So she's been like a 45-year-old since she was like 12. So.
Right. which probably helps you, Brady, right?
Oh my
It
gosh,
probably like balances you out. Yeah.
My story completely different.
Very
She's
different.
like wisdom and prayer and forethought. I go, spoiler for anybody who might watch, I am like a descendant of Mike McNeil. I go on a missions trip in 7th grade with our youth group. And for me, it was really simple. It was like the best week of my life. It was the first time ever that Jesus was more than just a Sunday morning conversation with some songs that we sing about him. Like we were doing ministry every day. I felt like the presence of God and what we were doing in a completely different way than I would in a Sunday morning gathering. And this was like the unspiritual moment of the call, because
Hey, God works in mysterious ways, right?
I'm talking to Mike and I'm like, man, I'm just having such a great time. If I could do this the rest of my life, I would. But I'm like, but I know nobody will ever pay me to do this. Like, there's no way I could make a living doing this, even just to get by. And Mike's like, believe it or not, somebody might pay you to do ministry. And that was all I needed. That was 100% of the permission I needed. And it was the confidence. Like, you know, there was a period of time where my family was like, Brady, like you've got these other skills and talents, you should invest into those and go to school for that. But I was like, I went on a missions trip pretty much every year and was like super plugged into my youth group. And I was most alive doing ministry or being involved in some form of ministry. And so for me, just from really 7th grade, like I only applied to one college. It was Kingswood. That was it. Like I didn't apply to anywhere else. So for me, it was simple. I was like, I love doing this. I feel the Lord in it. I'm just going to go for it. And so even with that, it wasn't like the Lord is calling you to be a local church pastor. It was like, I love doing ministry. I know this school, like Kingswood University, does a certain kind of ministry that I love to do. I'm going to go there. And really just from that point on, it's just kind of, everything's kind of fallen into place, right? There wasn't that like, you're going to be a pastor at a church in Elmira, New York. That didn't really happen that way. So.
Well, this. There's a song that comes on the radio every once in, like on the oldies channel every once in a while by Leonard Skinner, named "Simple Man." And the guy's got like a really gruff voice like yours too. He's got that rasp, and like every time I hear that song, I think of you. And there's nothing wrong with being a simple man, Brady. Like like I got to focus. I'm going for it. There we go. So
see what happens. Yeah.
So yeah, that's great. And I think probably like everybody's call is different. And so somebody can be called to be, something in the secular field too. It doesn't necessarily mean a call to what we call full-time ministry. But I think what you said about like, I feel really alive. I think that's a good indicator. Whenever we're doing something where you would go, I would do this even if nobody paid me, and it makes me feel really alive. That's probably a pretty good indication that where we need to be, right? So yeah. So how is, like, you guys you're like out in ministry for a couple of years now out of school. How is ministry different from what you thought it was going to be when you were in college and you had like all those dreams of what it was going to be like?
The first one.
You go for it.
Yeah. I think with the particular program we're in the Praxis program, again, Mike's program, and it's lots of hands-on ministry, evangelism, in a lot of different climates, I guess, right? Whether it's a soup kitchen,
environments,
prison, it's all over the place. And it's straightforward. There's people who need to know Jesus. Let's tell them about Jesus in whatever fashion possible. And I think for us, and again, kind of taking it back to the calling conversation, I went to Bible college knowing that I just wanted to love people, love Jesus, never really the mindset of pastoral ministry. And pastoral ministry is its own niche. Like there's something about it. And I know for me, especially, it's been a learning curve. I'm a pretty like straightforward person, but sometimes when you're pastoring, when you're leading people, especially, we're a big part of leading a church through a merger, which, if that word makes no sense to anybody who's listening, it's one church with its own unique identity and mission and vision, combining with another church that's unique in all those same ways, and trying to make like a family out of that. And so for me, a lot of the people skills, a lot of the patience and the waiting, and probably those are the two biggest words for me, right? Like, I
Yeah,
just
like, well, there's a lot
done,
of compromise and diplomacy involved in
and
bringing
that
people together, right?
two
Yeah.
even better words, I think,
Yeah, yeah.
compromise, diplomacy. And so, at school, you don't get the chance to flex those muscles very much, realistically, right? But being in it, and you're in the same building every day, like you're with the same people every week. And so for me, it's been kind of like developing new ministry muscles with those two things in particular. So
yeah, I would probably just add, for our time while we were at school, we were doing like a lot of the week-to-week ministries in different places, which was it's very exciting and fun. Like Brady and I just were always very filled up by that. And so, like Brady said, you just plugged into the same community week in and week out. And so you kind of go from having it, like, I'm here for the next 3 hours, or like for this weekend, I want to make the most of it, to now, like, you really do have to have both the short term and the long term in mind, because you're going to be walking this road with the people at your church for a long time. It's not just going to be for a one event or one weekend ministry experience. And I think also for us, how it's changed is Victory Highway, the main campus that's located in Painted Post, is about half an hour from the Elmira campus. It's a larger church. And so pre-COVID, we would have about 1,500 people in the building on a weekend. Where Brady and I are at the Elmira campus, pre-COVID, the church was rising a little bit in attendance, but we would have about 100 people in service on a Sunday morning. And so for us, coming from Victory, being in a larger church context, a lot of what I had learned at school was framed in my mind in a large church context way. And so, much like Brady was saying, it's a huge learning curve, because now not only are we in pastoral ministry specifically, but we're also in a smaller church context. And some cultural things are just different. Some expectations are just different. And so in that regard, I think that's been a big learning curve for us.
Yeah, coming from a big church, I don't want to say this delicately. Of course, you're always pastoring. At a big church, you're always ministering to people, but that one-on-one interaction, like at a church of 1,500 people, you don't know everybody's name and their life story. But
and there's not an expectation that you will, right?
There's no expectation for that. It's not realistic. But we merged with a church when we merged with Elmira Wesleyan. They were a church of about 50 people, and their previous pastor was it was a pastor's couple. It's really, his title was pastor, but his wife was just as much of a pastor. And they're incredible. They knew everybody's name, everybody's story, their background, and they had years of relationship built up. And so for us stepping into that, we grew up in Victory with a very different understanding of that one-on-one relationship. And so stepping into that was a big learning curve, just realizing that that expectation is different, and not something that we could necessarily train for. It was just like, here you are, you're in it right now.
Right. And there is, and ministry is like more of a marathon than a sprint, for sure. Like and there are parts of, I guess there are parts of there are parts of my job that I really enjoy. And there are other parts that are just mundane and that you have to do like day in and day out. And I think everything we do has like a certain element of the mundane in it, where it's not like super, it may not be super motivational or exciting, but it just has to be done. And probably part of mature, and I'm like not the most mature, I'm like, I've never been accused of being mature. It kind of comes and goes, but because I really like adventure and I like a lot of variety, but I think a big sign of maturity is being able to do like all the things that need to be done, whether or not it's in the same place every day, all those kind of things. What was it like? What are some of the maybe advantages and disadvantages? You guys probably didn't think when you were going through school that you would be going back to your original local church and your community. And I know that there's some things that are really good about that, and also some things that could be challenges. You share about that for a minute?
Yeah. Wanna go? You want me to?
You go ahead.
We're gonna do that every question.
That's okay.
Yeah, no, we didn't. And I've even told some people, like, we applied to a few other places, and even when we went to Kingswood, there was this streak of rebellion in me. I'm like, I'm gonna go far away from home. I want to live an adventure. I've lived in New York my whole life up to this point. And so landing back here, 100% believe it was the Lord, and we're really thankful to be here. Advantages, people already kind of know us. Again, though, it's a big church. So there's a lot of people who are like, oh, they grew up here, but I never saw them. Like,
yeah, you were gone for 4 years for
right.
For the most part.
And even the staff, like the staff between when we graduated high school or when we moved on to Kingswood and when we came back, it changed significantly. And so, some people knew us, but in some sense too, it was like us being strangers to a majority of the staff. So pros and cons with that, particularly with coming back to Victory, we already had an understanding of the church's DNA, like who Victory is. Most naturally, we kind of had an understanding of that. And so for us, when you're interviewing for a job, you're not just being interviewed, you're also interviewing the place you're looking to go to.
Right.
And for us, we've been doing that our whole lives, apparently. So kind of getting used
you just didn't know it was a really long job interview, right?
right.
Yeah.
And so the advantage there is we knew, obviously we hadn't been sitting in on staff meetings for years, but we knew the culture of the church, and it was a culture that we could get behind and see ourselves fitting in with very well. So that was a big advantage. Advantage of living in the area we grew up, like we had a kid 9 months ago, and having family and friends around when you have a child and you're trying to lead a church, incredible. Like I could not imagine being all alone as far as that stuff is concerned, having a child and trying to do ministry. Like there'd definitely be some weeks we'd pulling our hair out. So
yeah, I do think that our time away while we were at Kingswood grew our fondness of home. I think before that, like Brady said, like we were very ready to get out of Dodge, so to speak, and just experience something new. And really our third and fourth years, I believe, while we were at Kingswood is when we were coming back home and visiting our families and our friends here. Home started to become very sweet to us. Like we would look forward to going home versus like, I have to go home. Where else am I going to sleep?
Right.
On breaks or during summer breaks. And I think that fondness definitely grew in our hearts. And so we actually ended up doing our last semester of Kingswood, which is like the student ministry experience at Victory. So that was kind of like our foot in the door to being back home. And even that, the internship with Victory, we did not have any idea that it would turn into a job. We were kind of hoping it would, but we had no idea if it would. And so even just that time while we were home it was just sweet to be surrounded by friends and family that we had known, people who had discipled us for years. Part of the reason like why we believe in Jesus, why we got baptized, why we were considering going into ministry, like those people were home with us during that internship time. And so just realizing all of a sudden, like we were starting to get God's perspective of like, what would it look like if we did live here, stay here, work here? And just, I think some of like the wisdom and vision that we were able to gain from God and also the leadership at the church in that time opened up our perspective to saying, okay, maybe this is actually the best place that we could be versus going somewhere new.
Yeah. Like in looking at when you do podcasts, you can kind of get the stats and, kind of see who your audience is so far. So I've discovered that my audience is like 20 to 27-year-olds. So I think this is kind of a valid question. Like you guys mentioned the baby. So what's it like being parents? Kind of going across that's like one of the steps into adulthood as well too. When you have a child, it's like that's one of the major things. So what's that been like for you guys?
Sleepless. No rest for the weary.
Yeah, it's definitely a brand new dynamic. I think not only to ministry, but of course our marriage as well. And so Brady and I, we love doing almost everything together, including ministry.
Yeah.
And once we have a child in the mix as well, it's now more than ever, we're kind of like pulled in two directions. We're like, who's going to be with the baby while the other person goes and
Right.
this or does this. And so even in our marriage, it's been finding whatever that new groove is again. We also had our baby in the middle of COVID. And so I think like we had our son, and then I think a week later is when churches reopened for limited services.
Yeah.
And so that was a wild ride, especially for Brady, because I was out on maternity leave and he's, picking up all the responsibility and has, a healing wife at home and a new baby. So I think for him, it was especially crazy.
So it was like, what day of the week did we get back?
Like
from
a
the
Tuesday.
hospital? Was it a Tuesday?
Yeah.
It's our first, we were in the hospital for what, 4 or 5 days?
Yeah.
4 days. Again, long story short, he came a little early and with a few complications. So it was a crazy 4 days of no sleep and lots of anxiety, but I'll never forget. It's our first night back. It's the night that new parents talk about, right? And,
right. Well, you're on your own for the first time.
It's
Right?
like, oh my God.
They trusted us to take this baby home.
I'm responsible for this person.
Yes.
Crazy. It's like 11:30 at night. And all I remember is Sydney's like, okay, I'm going to like swaddle him and try to get him to go to sleep. Go ahead and relax. And I remember like laying down on our bed and putting my arms back like this. And next thing I know, it's just Sydney tapping on my shoulder, like, hey, I need your help. And it's like, what, 30 minutes, 45 minutes later, yeah. It's like, I wake up, I can't feel my arms fell asleep. And she's like, I need your help with Bo. And I'm like, who's Bo? like this,
like sleep deprived,
can't feel my arms. And I'm like, oh no, I hope this isn't what the rest of parenthood is like. Like, don't remember your kid's name. I don't know where I am. I can't feel my limbs.
Hey, the sleep deprivation goes away in about 20 years. You'll be okay. So Colleen and I, we're kind of at the empty nest, at the other end of all of that, at the empty
right.
nest. And so we're basically like, we're like teenagers but we have money this time,
right.
but we have all kinds of time and in those, I know in those early child rearing years, it's just like, there's no time, there's no sleep, there's
right.
none of that. So, but
I mean, for us, we're, on the flip side, there's the negatives, sleeplessness, like you said, to get through it. He's like a super happy kid. Like, it's hard to get a smile off his face. He is cute. And like, that's an objective truth.
Yeah, it's not subjective at all.
He's certified cute, right?
Right. Like, it's not one of those moments where you have to lie to the parents. Like, he's super cute. And so
where you go, that's some baby, right?
Right. Wow. No, he's cute and happy, and we're really thankful. Like a joy that I don't think we've experienced really in any other capacity. Mm-hmm. Just the kind of joy that it is, right? Like, it's super unique parenthood we're discovering. And
I think you really understand the unconditional love. Like, you understand God the Father more, right?
Oh yeah. And I've heard so many people say that, and I was like, yeah. No, I get it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think I don't really have any regrets in life, but if I could, I don't know how Colleen feels about this, but if I could change one thing, I would have had like at least 2 more kids. Like, it was like over too fast. We should have had a couple more kids. So,
right.
So it's definitely a blessing. Definitely a blessing. So for anybody that's kind of studying for ministry now and in that kind of formative phase, you guys, like, what do you have any big takeaways from the last couple of years, like any kind of wisdom that you might pass along for people that are kind of heading in your direction but not quite there yet?
Oh yeah, there's like so much that you could say.
You can go ahead.
I think especially for people who are going into ministry right out of college, or just going into ministry really at all, it's really important to have people in your corner, so to speak, people in your community, people that will pray with you and be honest with you. Just because as you go into ministry, it's unfortunately, I think pastoring can be an isolating thing. There's just sometimes people can think there's all these expectations that, I'm supposed to be, everyone's best friend, everyone's secret keeper, and I have to prepare my sermons, and I have to, appear perfect. And I think sometimes those expectations are unhealthy. Well, some of those are unhealthy. But with that, when you have community that's surrounding you, that's willing to pray with you and be with you throughout it all, that's just the strength that you will need. And our lead pastor gave us advice sometimes. He's like, not everyone at your church is always going to be happy with you. And sometimes, like at the end of difficult days, you have to just literally think through, like, okay, like, I know like my spouse loves me, in his case, my kids love me. I have like these close friends that would do anything for me. And like, do you have to focus on that? Not that everyday ministry is gonna be like that, but having those people who are in your corner is so important. So building that community that you can be honest with, I'd say will really prevail through a lot.
Yeah. I just echo that. Like we're really fortunate. We got married the summer between our second and third year at Kingswood. And something we learned even then is the importance of deep friendship and pursuing community. And people who went to school with us would know our apartment was always full of people. And we had some friends that were we pretty much lived with them, Nick and Sydney Craig. Like they were like family to us. And the lesson we learned from that is really a lot of what Sydney said. But when you're in ministry, you're pouring out almost always, like a Sunday morning context, Wednesday night if you're at youth group, if you're just out and about during the day in public, like you are, you're pouring out. And for us, we have a few couples that we consider like family, and they have been crucial. Especially in COVID, man, when it seems like the world is falling apart and it's like, what is happening with our church? To have people who love you and you can just be real with. And that's the other thing, like pastoral ministry, like Sydney said, it's not so much that you're wearing a mask, but oftentimes you have to be really intentional with your words, with your emotions. You have to hold things back.
There's a difference between wearing a mask and playing a role. I think like you have
Right.
a role that you're playing.
Exactly.
So yeah.
And having those people that you can just be real with and be like, man, I'm tired, man, I need prayer. That's been everything. I think the other thing we've learned, and I think it's going to be important for the coming leaders, we joined Victory, this big growing church where ministry is exciting every week. We're meeting new people. We merge with this campus, and our attendance grew from like 50 to 100 in a matter of a few months. And it's like, whoa, like this is the cool wins that other church leaders talk about, like growing a ministry.
Right.
And then COVID hit and it just rocked our socks, man. Like it seriously, everybody, every church ministry and what it looks like had to change. Like, and it was an afternoon, we're sitting in our office, and Victory wasn't a church that streamed. Like we'd put up a message like a few days later, like a video message.
Right.
We didn't stream. Everything was live in person. And we probably wouldn't have been a streaming church if it wasn't for COVID. But this is crazy. The other day I sat down with this guy, and he actually wanted to get lunch with myself and with Pastor Aaron. And I was with him for a few hours, but the bottom line was like, I want to thank you guys for taking your church ministry online. If it wasn't for Victory's online presence, my kids wouldn't be following Jesus today. And man, like the emotions, the tears, right? Because, I'm not going to lie, when COVID first hit and we went online, I want to be in the room with people, right?
Right.
That way. And there was a time where I was like, God, what's going on? Like, we're just getting by. This isn't working. And for me, I've just so learned in this season the value of, and it's like, sounds so cliche, we hear it in every sermon, but like actually trusting God, like actually thinking that this thing that he can't move this way, like he won't reach people this way. And then he does, and he completely shifts your focus. And so for me, there's been numerous testimonies of people who've experienced life change in this season. And, for some context for us, we were at one point in the middle of COVID, we were limited to 25 people in our building. So going from 100 and then being like, you can only have 25 people for a service.
And that includes the people doing the service too, right?
Includes,
So
yeah. So, worship some weeks, and it was like me doing worship and Sydney preaching, like,
right.
which is like super limited, but we've in a completely different way learned trust, I think.
You find the end of yourself very quickly.
Very, very quickly.
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't know how that comes across it as advice, but there's value in putting yourself in maybe situations that seem impossible to you. Like maybe you're in the Praxis program and you're struggling talking to people, or maybe you're I don't know, a churchgoer and you're like, I haven't been able to share my faith. It seems impossible. It seems like I just can't pull it off. Put yourself in situations and see what God can do in those difficult times. Because I think it's a valuable lesson to learn, because there's more to come. Like there's more challenges to come. So that makes sense. I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And it's like, I had a team out on ministry last night, and probably, I would say probably one of my most introverted, quiet students felt really led by God to walk up to somebody she didn't know. She just felt like she was singing on stage, and God was highlighting this person like out in the audience, and she didn't want to go and take that risk to talk to that person.
Right.
But after the service kind of concluded and we were having kind of a time of prayer, she just was like, no, I'm going to do it. And she got down off the stage and walked up to this person, and they started talking, and just had she just had an amazing ministry that she wouldn't have had otherwise. And and it's just that, it always comes down to that trust factor, right? Just like even when you don't know what's going on and you haven't got it all figured out, just trusting Jesus in the middle of that, and letting him set the boundaries for what's successful and what isn't, and how you measure things. I think everybody's wrestled with that through this season, this kind of unending season of COVID that we've been going through. So, well, hey, it's been great chatting with you guys, and I hope someday to be able to get stateside, and we'll swing by and visit the church, and visit you guys and see the baby, and all of that stuff would be great. But I always, I know you're not supposed to have favorites, but you were like two of my all-time favorite students. And I always tell every class, like, if you want to be my favorite, just like love Jesus and do anything for him, and then you'll be my favorite. And that's what I appreciated about you guys. Like, you were always just ready to, no matter what the context, you were ready to just jump in and serve God. And you're still doing that, which is really cool. And so we'll kind of end there. That's a great place, I think, to land the plane. And I'll just kind of end our recording. Okay, cool, guys. Well, that was yeah. That was good. Like, I have it was I don't know why, but people enjoy watching other people chat, and so and so the more it just feels like, hey, we're just hanging out chatting together, like the more it tends to be like a good time. So that was good.
Well, thanks for having us, Mike. I appreciate it.
Yeah. What's the rest of the day hold for you guys?
We long story short, I keep saying that. It's because there are long stories that you got to condense. I was supposed to be running a marathon this weekend.
Oh, really?
It was postponed.
Yeah, because you're like a runner instead of a lifter now, aren't you? Like you're like slimming out and all that.
Doing my best. But it was pushed off a month because of COVID, but we had originally taken from Wednesday till the end of this weekend off. And so we just kind of kept those off days on the calendar. And so now we're just kind of trying to relax. So not much.
Trying to relax, but yeah. And that's kind of a funny thing too about being like a smaller church, like where like it really is like Brady and I who are in charge of getting the stuff done. Is like this week especially, there's just some stuff that's just, even if it's a vacation day, there's still stuff that has to get done. So
yeah,
But yeah, we're gonna try to relax along the way too. Maybe.
Yeah, I'm kind of back to that too, like where I was heading towards like, having like a second person, like full, and then all of a sudden with COVID, it's kind of like, oh, it's just me again.
Right.
Like,
Right.
I'm just doing it all. So,
Right. Yeah.
so it is, it is a little, you get the same amount of stuff done, but it takes a lot more to get it done. So,
Yeah.
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 Exactly.
yeah. All right. Have a great day. And
Yeah,
this will be out like I actually interviewed Rachel last week. And so
Oh, nice.
she's the one that's kind of up online right now, but this will be out next week, and I'll send you guys I'll tag you in it or whatever. And
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
Did
can
you Zoom with her? I saw like a screenshot and it looked like you were together. Was that?
oh, I was out at her church like over the Christmas break, and that picture was from that time. But yeah, we actually we Zoomed for the, yeah. So I've had a few, like I had Brent Ingersoll in person and Austin White. I've had a few people in kind of our little studio here, but
Right.
for the right now, there's almost no one coming to campus, right? So
Mhm.
unless it's somebody like super local, and so like even with our grad this year is like Friday night is a celebration of the grad from last year, right? It's for anybody, and then Saturday is the people, but there's like nobody can come into New Brunswick without quarantining. And so literally it's just, there's a lot of student, if a student was on their internship in Ontario and they don't want to like quarantine for 2 weeks, they're just going to get their diploma, in the mail.
wow.
And so it's going to be like super, super different. Like there won't be, it won't be like the big thing that it usually is, but
Right.
it is what it is.
Right.
So,
Yeah. You make the most of it.
so Colleen and our plan, if we can pull it off, our plan, because you can still fly into the US, you just can't drive. And
Really?
so we're getting a vaccine on Monday, this coming Monday. And then our plan is to kind of relocate to the West Coast for most of the summer. So we're trying to get a place to live. Kyle and Megan's church actually has like an empty apartment that they keep for traveling speakers and stuff. And there's nobody traveling right now. So
Right.
so it's just been sitting there empty. So if we can get that, we will probably spend most of the summer just out in California, hanging out and doing
Sounds
what
like
we
a
can.
great
So
plan.
well, I was just like, I'm not like, last summer was my first summer in Sussex, like probably in like 30 years. So,
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, I'm not doing that again. Like I've been to every possible interesting place in New Brunswick now. Like I've got nothing left.
Yes.
I've got to get out of town. So.
Yeah, that's good, man.
All right.
Oh.
Okay.
See you later. All right. Bye-bye.